Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decor team. And I'm Yetta Decker, and there's a whole bunch of other Deckers as well as many other members of the team. And today I have with me a guest, and her name is Tracy, and she happens to own a company that's an interior decorating company, and it's called Anderson Phippen. And so we welcome you today, Tracy. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And so what we're hoping today to do is to give you all kinds of amazing insights and information on what is interior decorating all about, what is important today, what are the trends today, where specifically is it best to spend your money. We've talked about some of the cost and benefits of return on investment in other shows, and this one's much more geared on the actual interior decor aspect and not necessarily as much on the actual best rate of return, maybe more about what suits you best and what's more comfortable to live in. So we'll look at it from both perspectives. So Tracy,
yes,
what would you say is probably the biggest question you get around interior decorating? I know it's the one I've asked you the most.
Yeah. A lot of times what I'll have is people asking, where's the best place to invest my money?
And how much money, I
yes,
understand.
And how much money do I spend? And,
right.
you know, to what extent will my investment pay off for selling? So a lot of times you really have to look at your budget, your individual budget, and you also have to look at
how I don't have a budget.
Oh, that's hard. Okay. And you know what? That's very true. That is true. That does help a lot. So one of the things that I ask my clients is how long do they plan on staying in the house? I try to get an understanding of their lifestyle. Do they have young children? Do they have kids that are heading off to university? Because if so, that's a huge investment that they maybe need to allot their funds there as opposed to into their decor. So we try to find options for them that are affordable but still give them a home that they're satisfied living in.
Right. So something that just looks a little fresher, a little newer, that doesn't necessarily take a whole lot of dollars.
That's right. And that's easy enough to do. I mean, the easiest thing to do to give a home a facelift, as you would know, is paint. I mean, paint is your best friend. It's affordable. It looks great. You can have a lot of fun with color. And it's not something that's permanent. It's not something that you can't change down the road if you don't like it. The other thing that I do tend to ask is how long they're planning on staying in the house. If it's a plan that they may be leaving in 5 years, we're not necessarily going to want to do a complete kitchen gut and renovation. We may just want to do something that freshens up so that in 5 years the kitchen looks current and is saleable, but we're maybe not going to invest the same amount of money into the cabinets that we would if they were staying long-term, because your kitchen cabinets take so much wear and tear, and the difference between a high-end cabinet and a middle-end or a lower-end cabinet is basically the construction of the boxes. So whether it's a solid wood box or a melamine type box. So if somebody's only staying 5 years, a melamine box would be more than fine, and that'll give them some substantial savings, as well as the type of door that they select. And
and even the type of hardware and the type of handles.
Hinges, exactly.
The whole big picture. So from a budget perspective, if I'm living in a townhome, let's say, would I change dramatically my budget versus maybe I'm living in a 4-bedroom, 2-story versus maybe living in an estate area? How does that all fit into the interior? Paint is still it, I think.
Yes,
and then on top of paint, how does that all?
Well, then it's your fit and finishes, because when you're, selling something or living in a home in the estates, the expectations for that house are a lot different than your very first townhouse. An example of that would be the type of material you use on the counter. You would be looking at things like granites or quartz. Versus in a townhome you might be using a Formica, but there's wonderful Formicas out there now. There's one by, I believe it's either Formica or Belanger, and it's called 180FX. And what it is it's a Formica or laminate countertop that literally looks like travertine or limestone or granite or marble. And you have to touch it to be able to see that it's not the same. And so it's a wonderful way to achieve the look at a really great price point, and that's what makes it attractive.
And how is that product versus the traditional countertops that we're familiar with? Where would that budget fit in?
It is about, so a typical laminate countertop, once you get into the higher end, because this is the higher end of the laminate, the 180FX, you're usually about $10 to $20 more a square foot on that than the entry level, which is like 25 dollars a square foot. So you might be at $35, $40 a square foot.
Okay, and then to move into something like granite.
And granite is all over the place. If you start at an entry-level granite, which is a level 1, you can start at about $60, $65 a square foot.
Okay.
They go up 4 levels. When you get to your level 4, the price range is dramatic because there's so many different stones that fall into that category, and there's quite exotic stones. So it's going to depend on how much mica's in it. It's going to depend on where it's come from, the availability of it.
So the whole supply and demand conversation that we have on everything around real estate, right?
Exactly, exactly. And the more exotic granites are going to become very, very expensive.
And what does exotic mean? Is it just because it's crazy and wild a pattern, or is it because of where it's from?
It's from where it's from, and it's what it's made out of. And like quartzites are beautiful. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're a lot harder than some of the granites. And they have some of the properties visually that you would see in a marble, but they're not soft and porous like a marble. So those are things. The other thing that you're really seeing a trend in now with kitchens is quartz. A lot of people are selecting quartz.
And what's the contrast between quartz and granite?
So the difference between, that's a great question. The reason they're selecting quartz is quartz tends to have a more consistent pattern to it, where granite is very unpredictable. When you go into a granite store and you see a slab, you want to not just pick your granite from a small piece. You actually want to go see the slab that you're going to purchase, because from one slab to the next, the color changes, the pattern changes.
Well, of course, it's a natural product.
Exactly. Yep, depends on what was happening in the environment at the time that stone was being formed. Right. But it's funny because a lot of people don't recognize that, and they'll pick it off this little 4x4 piece, and then when they see it, they say, well, I thought there was more white in it, or I thought there was more, less rust in it, and that. So for someone like me, I'm really particular. I could never pick off a little piece. I would have to see my slab and then go to my fabricator and help him determine where I wanted what.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha.
And that, so I have a little OCD there.
Okay.
But with the...
And you bring that to your clients?
I do, actually. I do.
And
and when we're looking at the slab, one of the tricks I always teach them is not to look straight on, but to actually tilt their head and look at the slab, because they're standing, and turn your head the way you're actually going to see it. Because when it's standing, it's one thing, but when it's laying on your counter, the pattern is very different. And so it's a great trick. And that, so that there's not, it eliminates some of the surprises when it gets installed. But the nice thing about the quartz is, versus a granite, is the quartz is basically maintenance free. Bacteria doesn't penetrate it. You don't have to polish or condition it every few years. And you don't have to be as careful about things like wine and pop and things like that can etch the granite.
So is quartz a man-made product, or?
What it is it's actually quartz made from quartzite. They grind it down into like a dust, and then they use a resin that makes it solid. So because of that, if you took a pot right off the stove that was on high heat for a very long time and you set it directly on the quartz, you do run the risk of melting and making a mark on it.
Yeah. So I guess you're not going to do that.
Yeah,
Whereas with a stone,
but I mean,
you don't really risk that.
Well, with a granite, what you run the risk of is if there's a fissure in the stone, again, with that intense change in temperature, you can crack it. So there's really nothing that's 100% maintenance free. We always want to look for that. There are choices that are better for us than others, and that. So.
And then what about things like Corian?
Corian is great. It has more of a matte finish, and I find people either like it or they don't. The benefit of Corian that's really neat is that you can actually do a sink that's formed right into it. If it does get scratched, it's easy to sand,
right, because you can just
the marks
buff it.
Exactly, exactly. And so it really comes down to, in the final end, is the look that you prefer.
Okay, so if you want something that is dramatic and where there's different veining and there's all kinds of wonderful looking things in your stone, you're going to go with granite.
Yeah, and some
that's
granite,
going to be your only option, really.
Yes, yeah, and some granite looks like artwork. Like it really looks like a painter has painted it.
It really
does. It's spectacular, and with the right lighting over it, if there's beautiful pieces of sparkle and iridescent chips in it, it looks spectacular. It's like jewelry.
Well, it is jewelry.
It is.
Really, it's jewelry for our kitchen counters.
Exactly.
Who thought we'd ever get to the stage where we were putting jewelry in our kitchen counters? Anyway, we're there.
Yeah, exactly.
in this era.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I was going to say, and one of the other trends that you're finding right now in kitchens too is we're starting to simplify. It's very simple design, very clean. We're scaling back from a lot of the traditional design, the raised panels and whatnot that you used to see indoors. You're seeing a lot of slab doors, which is a flat door. Shaker style is always a great investment.
And just in case somebody doesn't know what a shaker style is, Tracy, maybe could you describe that? Because not everybody's getting to watch, and even if you're watching us today, then you can't actually see the door because we don't have any in front of us.
Exactly. So a shaker style door is a rectangular door that has a decorative frame around the outside, almost like a picture frame, and the panel is actually recessed in. And it's just a very simple rectangular design. You see it everywhere. And the nice thing about that design, especially if you're looking at not staying in your house long term, is it's a design that is transitional. And what I mean by that is someone who's traditional will be attracted to it, and someone who is more of a contemporary urban design will be, a sense of style will be attracted to it.
So just before we leave the countertops, because we got to spend a lot of time on countertops, so I hope if you all like countertops, and that is in relation to the cost of Corian.
Yes.
Where does that fit? We kind of gave an idea of the other
Corian is not cheap. It's, you know what, it's pretty close to where you're at with your granites. It's
depending on the granite.
Exactly,
because I've even heard sometimes Corian's more expensive than granite.
It actually is. And again, there's all different levels within it. And so that's what's really hard when I have a client that says, you know, how much is this going to cost? It's one thing to see your slab of granite, but then the fabrication is what changes the price as well. How many finished edges, how many cutouts, how many drill outs for the taps. So
each one increases the cost. So when we're talking, what did you say was the bottom end for the cost of granite?
65
to the sky's the limit?
Yeah, you can be over 200 on some of them.
Okay, so $65 a square foot to $200 a square foot plus for granite, and then you're also paying for the sanding of the edges, for how you want the edges done, and I'm assuming the trend is flatter now?
Yeah, and yes, the nice squared off edges, and the other thing we're seeing is a thinner countertop. We've been using the inch and a quarter. Yep, we've been using inch and a quarter for a while.
But that's nicer.
I know, it is beautiful, and then we've had the nice 2 or 3 inch reveals on waterfalls, but the trend that was coming out of Germany about a year and a half ago was using the thinner countertops, and you will start seeing that. Yes, it should be.
Should be.
It should be.
I heard the should be there. Did you all hear the should be? Which means it's not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Because even with the quartz, I'm trying to remember, there's only one company right now that has the 1 centimeter, and I think it's...
only 1 centimeter? So we're talking less than half an inch?
Yeah, about that much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a
so it's getting
profile.
very thin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So who knew? We all thought thick was better, and now we're saying thin is better.
Yeah, we do these trends, and and the other thing that we're seeing is everything is very hidden. You know, we're taking a lot of the clutter off the countertops. We're putting things behind doors, like our beverage centers, our coffee makers, our toasters. We're putting those behind cabinets and then rolling those out and
so
getting that.
When you're saying putting them behind cabinets, does that mean the cabinets now are coming right down to the countertop? And in fact,
yes. And
Yeah.
then they're in behind doors, so you would use almost like an entertainment style door, where a roll-back door where it rolls back into the cabinet, and then your stuff is there. You can have it on a pull-out. But it's
whereas
just,
what we used to have is the cabinets would be, what, 18 inches away from the countertop?
Yeah.
And then we would have our cabinets above that.
Yes, and you're still seeing that.
Okay.
But then
in special spots, especially I'm
Yes.
assuming in larger kitchens.
Yes.
Because in smaller kitchens, I'm assuming people don't want to give up their counter space.
No, exactly. Well, exactly. Or they're putting them in, you know, out of sight.
Right, into another cupboard somewhere else and still leaving that space.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, perfect. Is there other types of countertops now that we've explored that topic pretty good? Is there other things that are trending or that
concrete is really, we're seeing a real trend in concrete. And the nice thing about concrete is you can add tinting to it, which allows you to change it to whatever color you want. You can add some texture to it, put pieces in it like glass or whatnot, and form it into any shape that you want as well.
Wow. So now where does that fit price line? Because now you're talking
it gets
art.
Costly. Yeah, it can be quite expensive in that.
Okay. So is that like that 150 plus
a
square foot, or just
You know what? No, it would fall within probably maybe a level 2 or level 3 granite. So you could be around $70 to $85 a square foot.
Okay.
You know, depending on it. We're not seeing as much of it in Ottawa, but it is very prevalent in Toronto and the larger cities.
And probably in the
Montreal.
higher end.
Yes.
And in the more
Yep.
contemporary
and in the urban
style.
lofts, exactly.
Yeah,
You're seeing a lot of loft living right now. So it's
So is
very
everybody
much-
out there measuring their countertops right now to see how many square feet?
length times width times the price? Yeah,
Exactly.
the price, yeah.
And so if you're just joining us today on the Inside Track on Real Estate, we actually have Tracy with us from Anderson Piffin. And she is talking about interior decorating. And so far, believe it or not, we've mostly talked about countertops and a little bit about kitchens. So you may have to join us for 4 or 5 shows. Yeah. Anyway, at this point, if you did want to hear more about countertops and the different costs and the different trends and all of that, go back and listen to the first half. And now we're just going to chat a fair bit about kitchens. Let's see if we can wrap up kitchens. And I'm sure people are waiting to hear about bathrooms and other areas of the house.
Yeah. So basically with kitchen, it comes down to when you're renovating or decorating your kitchen, you want to make sure you have a good layout. And so you want to focus on your work triangle. And that's the space between your fridge, your stove, your sink.
Where does the dishwasher fit in?
And the dishwasher's in there as well.
Okay, because I remember designing a kitchen that I thought was beautifully designed, but unless you climbed over part of the countertop, the dishwasher you couldn't get into.
Was it a U-shaped kitchen?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And I had to have it. And my interior decorator, my kitchen guy said, don't do it. You don't want it. And I said, oh, but I do.
Because you gain so much counter space and so many cupboards. But you're right. In a U-shaped kitchen, or sometimes we call it a C-shaped kitchen, you do laps. You literally do laps around the space and around the island and whatnot. So, you know, you have to understand whether or not that's going to get to you. There's a galley kitchen, which is great for small space, meaning that you've got your cabinets down each of the long walls, and it's very functional. But in that sort of kitchen, that is primarily just for the function of the kitchen and cooking. There's not an eat-in area.
Right, unless it's beyond where the galley is. Because we're seeing that in a lot of townhomes.
Yes.
And even a lot of the newer homes now that are a good size. They're doing almost a galley style with an eating space.
That's right, at the
beyond
end.
that, at the end of
exactly.
that. And that's a cool kitchen because
It's a great layout.
for the amount of space,
you pack a lot in. You have a lot of cabinet and storage, and it probably is the most efficient, I find, of all the designs in being able to function. You're not running from one end to the other.
No, you're just going across, and you're like 3 feet or 4 feet. How far from side to side?
Depending on the size, depending on the size. Usually I'll allow about 42 to 48 inches because when your dishwasher drops down, you want to be able to walk around it.
Right,
and,
so that's 4 feet.
Yep.
Which isn't a lot of space.
No,
so really, with
no.
your kitchen being 2 cabinets or just over
24
2 feet,
inches,
right? And then on both sides, you're 4 feet there and another 4 feet. So in
you're
an
at
8 foot
8 foot.
space, you're getting an abundance.
Yes, of storage for that.
Right.
That's
And countertop.
Yes, yeah, oh, exactly. And depending on what you do with your cabinet configuration as well. It's a good kitchen layout. What you want to do is really, before you even invest a single dollar, I always ask my clients, we sit down and have a talk about how they cook and how they function within the kitchen. What are their beefs about the space that they're in now? Because you don't want to repeat those same mistakes. Then another thing I recommend is that they start an idea file and we start clipping pictures of things that are attractive to them, and we start trying to find trends, defining a trend that they have that's consistent, and then we start trying to put that into their design that we do for them.
It's a lot of work.
It is. There's a lot.
It's not a 10-minute thought.
No. And you know what? Kitchens, I find, are probably one of the more challenging rooms to design because every person functions within the space differently. You cook differently. Some people use their oven more. Some people use the microwave or the cooktop more. It really, really
whether
is
you need double ovens, whether you want a double wide fridge, whether you want a separate fridge freezer unit.
Yes, exactly.
So many things to consider, right?
And it depends on the budget, it depends on the space, it depends on whether or not they're going to be living there long term, or if it's just a facelift, maybe it's just a matter of changing the doors and adding rollouts. The big trend we're seeing right now that's really huge in kitchens is organization. Organization everywhere.
Is it helping?
Do you know what it does? Because you're no longer digging through that junk drawer or looking through that drawer with a spatula, and everything is loaded in. And for people who already have cabinets, it's something that they can modify afterwards. There's companies out there that will come in and retrofit pull-out drawers and design them so that you've got all your slots.
With pull-out drawers sometimes, and I've had my share of them, sometimes I find I actually have less space in the cabinet So
you don't get to stack things as high
Right,
as when
you
it's 2
can't.
doors. The benefit to it, though, is when you pull it out, you can see everything versus the
you
cabinets.
don't lose the bowl. I actually
Exactly.
lost something recently for about 8 months.
Was it
and
in
I
one of
found
those
it
cupboards?
in one of those cupboards, yeah.
And you know,
Yeah.
when you get into corner units, there's things like Lazy Susans where you can put your appliances on and spin it around till you get to what you want, so you're not climbing in the cupboard.
Right.
The other thing are the magic corners. They're costly, but what happens with that
What's
is
a magic corner? I'm sure everybody's
they're
thinking,
wonderful.
we want magic.
Yeah.
So what's a magic
What a
corner,
magic
Tracy?
corner is it's a bin system that as you open your door, it's 2 separate pieces. The first piece slides right out and the second piece comes up. And so you have access to everything. And then when you push your door closed, they actually slide back into the blind corner cabinet.
Okay.
So it's
Because
very
there's
efficient.
a lot of kitchens with a blind corner cabinet.
Yes.
It's like, what
Yeah.
on earth am I supposed to do with that?
Exactly.
So here's an
It's a
innovation.
wonderful product, exactly.
Okay.
So that's one that we tend to use as well.
Perfect.
But,
So you mentioned a little bit about cost in terms of doing kitchen cabinets and about solid cabinets versus our press board cabinets.
Yep.
What, you know, if I need a great look and I don't have a lot of money, how would I go about that?
You know what? I was just working on a house, and one of the things that we did was we actually used a melamine base unit with some really nice slab doors, and we mixed a lacquer with a walnut embossed grain. And then what we did was we dressed it up by putting quartz countertops on it. And then we did some beautiful backsplash and some really nice lighting, because lighting really is the one element in a home that a lot of people miss. Yep, there's 4 types of lighting in a house.
Okay, let's
And,
talk about the 4
okay.
types of lighting, because I think that sounds like a different direction and fun.
It is, and you know what? It's one of those things that when you look at home magazines or home shows, there's always something you like about it, and a lot of times it's the fact that there's 4 layers of lighting in a room. And so the 4 layers of lighting are, the first is ambient, and that's the one everybody has, and usually most people stop at. And so that's the overall ambient light that you put in the center ceiling fixture that lights and illuminates the whole room so you can have safe passage within it. And that's great. Then the next type of lighting that you want to have is task lighting. So that's a type of lighting that is for specific tasks. So in
Like
a kitchen,
over a sink,
yep,
or
in a
over a
kitchen,
specific
yep,
countertop.
yeah,
or
yep. It would
that
be
kind
your
of thing.
pendants on an island. It would be undermount lighting in a sink or under cabinets. It would be sconces beside a bed for reading. Or a lamp on a table, that sort of thing. So now you're creating different layers within the room. You start with an overhead, then you come down. The next type of lighting is called accent lighting, and it's literally that. It's the decorative, pretty lighting that you use to highlight and accent areas of a room. So it could be pot lights that are used over a window treatment where you have silk drapes, so that you're illuminating the shimmer of the silk to give some nice depth
Or
and
over a
definition.
fireplace with a nice
exactly,
piece
with
of
beautiful
artwork
stone,
or
exactly.
stone,
Yep,
or- yeah.
exactly. So that would be what accent lighting is. It's one that you can bring out your architectural details and interest in a room as well with it. And then the last is called decorative lighting, and it really doesn't serve a purpose of lighting a room, it just makes it look pretty. So things like a fireplace, candles, that sort of thing would really, a mirror placed in the right place.
So it's not
opposite a
even
window.
actually lights.
Yeah, it could be a mirror that's opposite a window that again reflects light into the room. So,
Okay.
but yeah, it's basically your fireplaces and candles and whatnot. That
Okay,
just
'cause
add
when you
that
say
in.
lighting, I'm thinking it's got to be a light bulb.
Yep, exactly.
And you're saying not at all. It could be anything.
Yep, it's your
that
natural light, your
creates
skylights.
reflective light.
Exactly.
Now, Tracy, another area of lighting that I used to have, and I don't see as much anymore, is the skylights or the solar tubes. Where does that fit into your 4 stages of lighting?
Well, with the 4 stages of lighting, the solar tubes give off quite a lot of light. So they actually can be your ambient light, the overall light. If you have a dark
Oh,
hallway,
okay.
only in the daytime though, because at nighttime, obviously it's dark. So
The
at that
stars
point,
don't
yeah, no, and even a full moon isn't enough.
Doesn't do it? Okay.
Exactly. So generally, they give a lot of overall natural light and can become your ambient light through the daytime.
Wow.
But then you would still need a fixture for nighttime.
Okay.
And that.
And what else would you, I guess windows, you're calling those ambient light as well?
Yeah, they allow your natural light in exactly as well.
Okay.
And so the other thing too that I forgot to mention is that when people are putting lighting in their house, one of the things I really, really strongly recommend is to use dimmer switches, because that allows you to create ambience within the room. So an ambient light that's a general overall light, once you put a dimmer switch on it, if we bring it down to a very low light, it now becomes accent lighting.
So you can get two
functions out of one light.
out of one light.
Yep, and you'll have many lights that do that cross over. Sconces can become task lighting, but they can also become accent lighting. Okay. So yeah, you'll see that they cross over depending on how they're used, the intensity of the light, whether it has a dimmer or not, and the placement of them in a room.
What about the types of light bulbs?
You know what? That's huge. Lighting, a lot of people really underestimate. Lighting has an effect on our health. And in fact, there was a study that was recently done where a company went in, they took out all their old fluorescent bulbs and put in a new type of bulb, and the productivity increased over 30%. Wow. Their employees' morale was much more positive. They were upbeat. The sick days went down. It was just an incredible environment just by changing the light bulbs. And so one of the things I always talk to my clients about is to take note when you go in a room how it makes you feel, because that's what lighting does. Sometimes it makes us feel really groggy. Sometimes it will make us actually feel agitated. For me, I'm very sensitive to fluorescent lights. I get headaches.
So you're a good one to call if we're trying to figure out our lighting.
Yes,
so now you know what to do. If you have any questions about lighting, about kitchens, about countertops, give us a call and we'll connect you with Tracy. So you've been joining us today on a show on interior decorating. And Tracy has done a fabulous job on covering a bunch of aspects.
Well, thank you.
And we have tons left over that we still wanted to talk about. So we're actually going to do a second show that you'll be able to find in the archive section on decorteam.com down the road a little bit, or you'll be able to find it at chri.ca. And before I forget, I need to tell you about an awesome property in Kemptville. It is listed at $270,000. It is a single family home where you're getting lots of space inside and outside. Who knew you could get a single family home not far from the city, just down the 416 for $270,000. So if you're interested in that property, want some more information on that one or any other property for that matter, give us a call at Decor Team, or give us an email, I guess, at Decor Team. You can check us out there on the web, or you can call us at 613-860-4663. And you can always send your questions to decorteam at chri.ca. And so we thank you for joining us today on the Inside Track on Real Estate, and we've so enjoyed having you here, Tracy.
Well, thank you. This has
and
been
you're
great.
Coming back.
I will for sure.
Thank you. We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
What you wanna do?